I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You're the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. Hope you had a great weekend. I know I had a hot one down here in Texas where the humidity was unusually awful. But it's good to be back in the cool studio here talking to you guys. Because, we need a break. God didn't rest on the Sabbath because he was tired. And I think he rested so he could give us, hey, take a break, take a breather. Go do something that's not work for a day, right? We all need to take a break. But we all have a tendency, I think a lot of us do, I do, have a tendency sometimes to go beyond that to the, I want to get away from everything, We call it escapism. And that can be a very damaging thing, actually, depending on how far it goes. How do we balance that? The godly idea of maybe taking a break and the damaging idea, because I think everything the enemy throws at us is a counterfeit of what God said. And so I think, you got the rest and then you got escape, I think is the counterfeit of it. And so we're going to explore that a little bit today with someone who has a book on it. It's part of a series of counseling books that's very helpful. It's called I Want to Escape. And it's written by Witt. And Rush is the lead pastor of Paramount Church in Bexley, Ohio. And he's also a certified biblical counselor. So all you people throughout my life that have said, you need help, I'm getting it right here, live on the air. Rush, good to have you on Life Today Live.
Thank you. I'll do my best, Randy. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this is not a free session to talk about the book. So off the top, anyway, I tried to kind of give my thoughts, my translation of this sort of the difference here, but you're the expert. What is escapism?
Well, that's a great question. I think that all of us have to be able to answer to some degree, and I think we're all learning to define that. I really think that I'm only an expert in escapism in the sense that I am good at finding ways to escape, and in that way, I think everybody is an expert in that. And so, actually, the reason this book came about was because I started noticing more clearly my own desire and tendency to escape, and also in the lives of people in my church, people that I would, counsel or discipleship, but in particular my own life. And of course, the pandemic brought that out so clearly. And so it was around that time that I just got really interested in thinking about what does the Bible say about this and how can we bring some simple help. So this book came about out of a desire to provide some short kind of biblical treatment to help us think about the different ways that we escape and how that could be maybe an overlooked problem in our lives, because it's difficult to get our hands around it. You sort of mentioned that a little bit earlier, and so I think it's an important topic for us to think about.
Would it be tied to how we face difficulties in our lives?
I think absolutely. It has everything to do with how we face them and, how we understand what our difficulties are, what their role in our lives are. I mean, to think that, the Bible so consistently, frequently talks about trials and difficulties as things that God is using for the good of his people. And yet I still find it work in my heart, this desire to get away from them or escape them. And that's not to say that there aren't, certain challenges. Certainly, like physical danger is a great example, where there needs to be a kind of escape, a distancing. Mm-hmm. But really, in this conversation that we're having, we're really thinking more about escape in terms of how do I bring a kind of counterfeit answer to the problems that I'm facing in my life. So absolutely, maybe that's a good way to talk about it, is the proper kind of biblical ways to face challenges and difficulties and the counterfeit ways that we tend to do that. That might be a good way to distinguish those two.
Yeah. Well, you're in Ohio. Are you a football fan? Is that?
Yeah, I'm a football fan.
So, when they go in for halftime, they go in to plan how they're going to play better. They don't go in to get out of the game.
That's right.
And I think,
Great example.
When I look at escapism, I think sometimes it's not taking a break from the stress and the
Great example.
responsibilities of life in a healthy way, so that we can turn around and address them better. Because that's what rest is,
Right.
I do think that's what the Sabbath is for, to keep it holy, to keep it
Right.
set apart. In other words, have a day where you don't do work. Do something besides work. And I work in the yard or something, or you spend time with family, in order that I can, when I, like today, coming back on a Monday where I actually have 4 interviews today because I'm preparing for some vacation time soon. I'm ready to go after this weekend, not because I escaped, but because I rested. Yeah. I took care of some things with my family, with my home, and now I can pour myself into the challenges. And this is an easy one talking to you. It's not like a problem, right?
For sure. Yeah. No, I love the way you're talking about that. I think that's exactly right, because when we think about rest in that way, you're thinking about rest as a means by which I'm going to face what I'm being challenged with. Yeah. And the rest becomes an instrumental tool to give me the energy or the focus that I need to kind of recalibrate and then move in the right direction. I think that's a beautiful way to put it, using that analogy.
So how do we know maybe that we're engaging in escapism in a negative way as opposed to just resting or something? What are some of the signs of escapism?
Well, I think here's a good way to, answer that question. I'm really helped if I can, somebody can give me kind of basic answers. I do best when the bar is a little bit low. And so if we just kind of have a basic answer, maybe working from the reverse.
Okay.
So what I talk about some in this topic about this topic in this book is the importance of what I'm calling something very simple sounding, courageous dependence as the answer to our desires to escape. So courageous dependence on God in the midst of these difficulties. And so if we take those two terms, courage and dependence, as the solution, it helps us understand, where am I going wrong when 2 things happen? 1, I become discouraged or I lose courage and momentum in the proper forward direction of my life. Or number 2, what happens to me when escape is going wrong? I become independent. I think that God is nowhere around to help me, and I need to solve this on my own, but I know I don't have the tools to do it. And so my best bet is to escape and run away. So those are a couple of ways I think I can see in my life when it's going beyond the helpful kind of rest, break, regrouping, recalibrating. When my courage is on the decline, I'm no longer looking to the Lord for help and anticipating overcoming a challenge, and I'm becoming independent from Him, trying to take control of things on my own. That's a good line for me. I'm sure that there are others. Do you think that kind of plays into your life? Do you see a similar kind of?
It does, and I'm trying to just look back and go, is that what I was doing by watching, Netflix all weekend, or was that rest? I mean, because let me ask you this: if I am escaping, if I got things that I need to address or things that I need to do, I don't enjoy what I would maybe call relaxation, even if it just means sitting down and watching a movie or something, because those things are rolling through my head. They're untended, untaken care of, and that's kind of the way I'm wired, which I think forces me to it. And if I just ignore it, then I think it becomes escapism. Is there an element of ignoring responsibility? And I don't just mean work. I mean the responsibility to maybe to go talk to that person, or to apologize, or restore a relationship, or encourage somebody, wish somebody happy Father's Day, yesterday.
Yeah.
Is there an element of not doing what you should be doing become escapism instead of just rest or relaxation, entertainment?
Oh, for sure. And that really resonates with me. It reminds me of, lots of examples in my life when I've done that very thing. And I think all of us are tempted to do it. I think one of the big ways, if we want to think about, one of the categories of escape that seems to be common to all of us, we might put a word on it that is something along the lines of denial. You mentioned earlier that I live in Ohio, and there has been a commercial campaign about the opioid epidemic in Ohio, and it's really clever and creative. What the campaign does is it visualizes a fictional city in Ohio that is the city of denial. And it pictures all of these families who live in denial, in Denial, Ohio. And so when they're faced with the opioid epidemic or the kind of dangers that it poses to their neighborhood or to their kids and the influences of that problem, they always dismiss it or deny that it exists. They say those classic things like, that could never happen here in Denial. We don't have those kind of problems in Denial. And that really resonated with me when I saw that commercial. And I thought, that's exactly the way that I often escape, by denying. Similar to what you're getting at in that question. When I'm watching or binging something on Netflix, it can be a kind of break, but often for me, it is, I have that in the back of my mind. I know that this needs to be dealt with, but I'm just going to, for a while, pretend that it doesn't exist.
Right.
And I'm going to deny that, live in that state of denial, and as though everything is comfortable. And that's the promise, right? That's the promise of denial. Denial says everything can be comfortable, everything can be okay if you can just sweep this problem under the rug and set your mind on something else. But, in reality, it doesn't work that way. It always comes back out from under the rug, and it always comes out worse. So it's an important, that's an important aspect, I think, to escape, for sure.
The subtitle of your book is Reaching for Hope When Life is Too Much. As a pastor, coming through the pandemic, it's crazy how much we talk about this, but it's real. And it did expose, I think, a lot of sort of pre-existing conditions.
Sure.
Exacerbated a lot of things that were already there, just made them worse, magnified things, like a magnifying glass on a lot of people's
For sure.
Has this come up a lot in your church? Is it generational, maybe a little more than, does it hit some generations more than others? Or what are you seeing out there practically in counseling and in your church?
Yeah, well, for the first part of your question, in terms of our church, that was definitely something that fed into my thinking and trying to work through this issue of escapism in writing this book. Because at the same time, we all remember, at the same time that the pandemic was going on, there were all of these political issues that were swelling. We had lots of very important social questions and issues happening. It brought to our attention lots of places of disagreement, especially in churches, whether churches should be online, whether they should keep going, whether they should space out the pews or the chairs, whether they should wear masks or not. And there was so much opportunity for conflict, and all of that fed into and pressed in on that desire to escape.
Right.
And we had lots of, not we in our church particularly, but in churches at large, there was a lot of shuffling around that happened where people were leaving one church to go to another because those pressures just were too difficult, and they thought maybe there was somewhere else, but then they found those pressures there as well. So yeah, it really did swell, magnify, show off some of the pre-existing, I like what you said, pre-existing conditions, for sure. The second thing that you asked is really interesting. I don't know that I have actually thought about that until you brought it up just now, is whether there's a generational component to it. I'm not sure what you think. I think, and I'm not a great historian, but I think maybe there is a little something to that in this present moment, and the ways that we're seeing escapism rising, compared to maybe past generations. I don't know if maybe one of the issues is that, past generations may have had a different kind of ethic about working on problems, or maybe it's a little bit of work ethic, where there was a little more bravery to push into problems, move forward,
Well,
And
certainly
maybe that's a little different today.
any generation that has survived a war probably has a little more grit.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Grit,
I wouldn't want to speculate too much. I guess what I want to know at the end of the day is if I have a loved one who is they've just checked out, and I want to bring them back, or maybe I feel like I am running, and I really need to not do that because it's in your words crippling.
Mm-hmm.
How do I turn that corner? How do I escape escapism?
Well, I think it's a lifelong. First, I think it's going to be for all of us a lifelong challenge. I think that our struggle with these kinds of sin issues and temptations are going to continue until the very end, when the Lord returns or we go to be with him, and everything is put right again. But in the meantime, I think that we have immense hope through the gospel of Jesus Christ for us to be able to face, to understand, to endure in a way, rather than escape in those kind of unhealthy ways, for us to gain those two things that I mentioned earlier, courage and an increasing dependence on the Lord. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us and potential because God is at work and his grace is sufficient. Now, I said earlier that I really benefit from a plan that I can understand. And so I've tried to put together, and there are a number of different ways that we could talk about it, but to put together what I might call a kind of 3-part plan for responding to this escapism problem. And first, we could remember it just with 3 words. They're easy to remember. 1, pray. 2, believe. And 3, act. The longer version would be pray with humility. This is one of the things that we need to counteract that independent feeling that wells up in me, that God is nowhere around. I need to take control or something like that. I need to pray with humility to become dependent, increasingly dependent, talk to God about my need for him. So pray with humility. And then to believe with gospel hope is second. And when I say believe with gospel hope, what I mean is that we need the constant reminder of what the gospel actually is. It's not just the thing that gets us into heaven. It actually is the announcement of good news of what Jesus has done for us, not simply to forgive us and convert or save us initially, but it's the good news that he's done everything necessary to keep maturing and helping us. Mm-hmm. And we need that reminder, and we need a growing belief in the gospel to give us the hope and courage that we need. And then finally, that third word was act. And the long version is to act with courageous dependence, to gather the help. Maybe I need some help from my church or a pastor or a counselor, maybe from a Christian friend to know what to do. But we have to make that shift to then act with courageous dependence and take the necessary steps to address whatever this challenge is that's before us that God is helping us to address. So that's a simple plan there that we can at least begin with and hopefully get us moving.
And that's what I need. I need steps. When I see something, it's like, what can I do about it? So that's actually very good, very helpful. This is the book, I Want to Escape by Rush Witt. And I also want to show you the website for New Growth Press. This is newgrowthpress.com. And like I said, this book is a part of a series that is called the Ask the Christian Counselor series. And very helpful. They got let's see, I'll scroll down. They got a lot of resources here. So you can go through, you can find books in this series, as well as the other things from New Growth Press. And then you can go to Rush's website. My name is rush.com. Love the atypical URL. That's nice.
Yeah. Well, I have an atypical name. So that's helpful, yeah.
Last question I have for you, and this is on a very serious note, because can escapism in its most extreme form, and this is not to suggest that it's the slippery slope. If I'm watching too much Netflix, I'm not going to
absolutely.
But can it, in its worst form? I I think we see addiction obviously as a very realistic place, but sure. Can it lead to suicidal ideation or action?
It absolutely can, and sadly, it absolutely does in so many cases. And I think that there are two kinds of two kinds of ways that this happens. One is a kind of everyday struggle way. And what I mean by that is that I think there is something tied to our natural desire to escape, that even you and I, when we are not thinking about something as serious, as suicide, or we're not thinking about that in really concrete terms, there seems to be in my heart a voice that when I'm really despairing of my situation, I start to have some thoughts of, maybe it would be better if I wasn't in this situation, or maybe it would be better if I wasn't alive. And those can be fleeting, intrusive, unwanted thoughts, but sometimes they can be much more serious than that, as we know, because the suicide rate is so very tragically high. The World Health Organization, I think, reports that 750,000 people die by suicide every year.
Jeez.
And that's not even counting the number of people that have these kind of growing intrusive thoughts, or maybe even serious thoughts about it. So absolutely, it's a major concern, and we want to offer major hope for people who have such a serious struggle going on with escape. And so for anybody who's feeling that way, or has a friend who is feeling like they're a danger to themselves, or they're really beginning to hit this low point of despair, I want to encourage all manner of help and care and seriousness to reach out to a trusted pastor or biblical counselor, a compassionate Christian friend, and know how to get help, especially if somebody is in that really darkest point, whether that is in the United States. Of course, call 911, get whatever help is needed right away. In Europe, 112, there are resources to help. And I think it's really very important. I'm glad that you bring that up.
Yeah, I've been told by people smarter than me, in other words, experts in the field, that most people don't want to die. They just want the pain to stop. And I can see how when escapism provides that relief to the pain, so you don't have to deal with life's hard moments, there can become a place. I mean, if you go the addiction route, then that's its own whole destructive road. But I think, like anything, enough is never enough after a while. And so the escapism becomes more intense, more prolonged, maybe different methods, whatever. But at the end of it, you're going to have to turn around and face it at some point, or you'll just pile on the pain to the point where you just don't even want to live anymore. I don't know. That's just, I've seen it in some people close to me, so it's anecdotal. But that's why I think this is an important issue. It's like if you're feeling that pull, and if you're living that tendency, turn it around while it's easier before it gets really bad.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very important. My wife really faced serious personal issues earlier in her life, which led down this kind of dangerous path, and it was a major struggle for her. In fact, in this book, I asked her to write a letter for anyone who's struggling, to be able to read that letter and gain hope, and maybe even some kind of compassionate perspective from someone they know has been in those trenches with them. And that's an important part of this book as well, because it lends another voice that can be encouraging and hopeful and helpful. And I'm really glad that's a part of this short book, as short as it is, to have this letter there. Really, really helpful.
Yeah. No, any encouragement and pointing people in the right direction, I think is powerful. I mean, it just takes that turn in direction that can change your mind. And once your mind changes, your feelings start to change. And once your mind and feelings are in change, your actions and words and your life changes. So
that's right.
Rush, anything you want to add before I let you go? I sure appreciate this conversation.
I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you and talk about this, because it is so important. And as you mentioned earlier, there are some other books very similar to this one in that series, Ask the Christian Counselor. They're not written just for counseling. Anyone could pick them up, and they are geared around specific kind of counseling questions that are often asked, whether it's anxiety and decision making, or maybe suffering a really serious betrayal, or being diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder and wondering, what does the Bible say to help me with this? This growing series is really, really helpful set of books. They're not very long, maybe 100 pages, And so they're great to give to a friend, take for yourself. And so I would encourage all of listeners to visit the website you mentioned, newgrowthpress.com, and learn more about those. See what kind of help there may be as we're all trying to grow together and move forward in the Christian life.
Yeah, great resources to help people, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the conversation. The website, again, if you want to check out the whole series, is newgrowthpress.com. It looks like this. And then, of course, Rush's website, my name is rush.com. Looking like that. And just to cap off the resources we're letting you know about today, I want to escape. So don't do it. Learn to fight, and fight well. You can overcome. That's the promise we're given in Scripture. So a little courageous dependence on God will go a long way. Appreciate you guys being here. We'll see you again on Life Today Live.